What are we making today? Hi, my name is Jenny, and we're going to be making a simple and easy book. This is a beginner level tutorial, and I'm going to walk you through how I create a simple little notebook using this gorgeous handmade paper. I have this collage book cover that I created. I used a bunch of scrap map images to create this, and it was a large 12 by 12. I collaged everything, inked up the edges, sewed all around it with my sewing machine, and then I cut it in half to get two book covers out of this one 12 by 12 piece. So I'm gonna show you how I create my book and my little process on how to get you started on making simple books. So I have 5 sheets of my handmade paper. This is a really beautiful cotton, soft texture paper, and it's something I picked up from Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description box down below so that you can find it. I really love this stuff. It really creates a vintage feel and looks really neat. So I'm just kind of figuring out that I need to cut off some of this paper. I'm going to have to cut off the edges to make sure that it fits nicely within my journal cover. And anything I cut away, I'm not going to throw away. This paper is like gold, so I keep every last little tiny itty bitty scrap of it. And I'll share with you some bonus tips at the end of this video on what you can do with those scraps. So I'm just cutting my paper down to make sure that it fits in my journal. I do that to all 5 pages. Once I have my pages cut to size, I'm going to take them and stack them inside of each other. So this is creating the signature to my book. Now, when you're creating a book, you can make multiple signatures. You can put as many pages as you want. You can make them any size that you want. Here, I'm just making them all very uniform. I'm going to make them fit nicely inside of my little cover here. So I'm just checking to make sure that I'm happy with the size, and I decided that my cover needed a little bit of a haircut. It just needs a little trim so that it frames those book pages nicely. And we're not going for perfect here. This is a very grungy vibe. I do enjoy vintage things and the grungy distressed look, but I also enjoy clean and simple too. So this kind of style of book kind of merges the two things that I enjoy together. All right, so this is all ready to go. I'm going to pull in my bookmaking tools and put this book together. In a previous video, I shared how I created this little box where I store all of my bookmaking tools. I'll link that video in case you want to check that out. So I have this little bookbinding thing. My husband made this for me with a 3D printer, and it's really cool. It just helps me poke the holes directly in the center of my books, and I don't have to measure or anything. So I'll link to a few sources where you can find stuff like this. I just line up my pages. I grab some big binder clips, make sure that my pages are right in the center, and then I put the spine of my book into this little cradle. Okay, and I'm going to grab a book awl, which is a tool that we use to poke holes in paper. I almost forgot the other piece to this book tool. This little thing, you just pop it in the center and press it into your book, and then I can pick where I want my holes to be. So I measure based on holes. I count 4 holes down, and then from the bottom, I count 4 holes up, and then it's, perfectly aligned, and I can see right where my holes are supposed to go. And then I just kind of pick one that's in the middle. So I'll just press my book all through those holes, and then there we go. We have the beginnings for sewing this signature together. I'm going to take a needle and some wax thread, and I'm just going to pop my needle through the center of this book, and I'll leave a little bit on the inside. I'm going to use this to tie it all together. And so I'm starting from the inside, poking my needle out, and then I'll come back in through the top hole, put my needle through those pages, and pull all that thread through. Okay, and then I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to skip the middle hole, go down through the bottom and out the spine. And then I'm going to come back through the center. Now, when I go back through the center, I want to make sure that I pull my thread to the side. I don't want my needle to pierce through the thread. I want it to go beside it. So I'm just going to pull my thread tight and then just find that little hole, poke my needle through, and then pull the thread through. All right. And then I'm going to make sure that those 2 tails that are there, one goes on each side of the long thread that's in the middle. It's just going to help me tie everything together. and then I'll pull nice and tight. I don't want to pull too tight. I don't want to cause stress on the holes, but I'm going to pull and then I'm going to tie a couple of little knots. The great thing about wax thread is that it really holds nice and tight when it's tied. So I'll just come in with my little cutters and cut off those little tails. And I'm going to save this extra piece of thread because I'm going to use that for a closure later on. Okay, so we've got our book tied. I'm going to cut these tails off. I thought about tying a bow, but I just want to get rid of them. Okay, now I can remove my clips and my book is sewn together. This is called a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Super simple and easy. You can do this to any size of book and it really only takes a few seconds. All right, so now I'm going to grab a piece of that scrap handmade paper and I'm just going to cut a few little pieces to kind of resemble a circle of sorts. It's not quite a circle. It's a kind of a weird shape, but I'm just cutting something that I can use as a closure for my book. So once I've got my shape cut out, I'm going to grab a brad and I'm going to poke a hole through those little pieces of handmade paper and right in the center. And then I'm going to push my brad through the center of that little hole. And then I'll go back to my book cover and take my book awl and poke a little hole in the front of my cover so that I'm able to push my little brad legs through that. So this is how we're going to close this book up. Pop the little legs through the front there and then spread those little metal bits so that it's secured in place and press it down. And now to avoid getting stabbed or anything, I'm going to take an extra piece of this handmade paper and just glue it to the edge. So I'm just going to cut off a scrap. You could go ahead and cover this entire back. I'm not really worried about that. I just want to cover up the part that, could potentially stab me. So I'll grab a little bit of liquid glue. I'll cover this whole piece and just lay that flat right to the edge of my book here and cover up those little brad legs. I'll press that glue into place and then I'm happy with that. Now we're going to work on the back part to create the closure to wrap around the front of this. This whole closure part isn't quite necessary. I just like the way it looks and I have the ability to tie it off so it doesn't pop open. This whole part here, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I just kind of was winging it. I poked a hole, I ran that thread through and tied a knot. You may find better ways to do this. I'm happy with the way this turned out. I just ran the thread through the inside and then back out and around and created this little loopy knot sort of thing. There's no technical term here. It's just, that's it. So I'm just going to cover up this back piece the same way as I had done with the front to cover up that little knot so that you don't see it. And then the book looks cohesive. It looks the same on the front and the back. I'll apply my glue, get that whole piece covered up, and then that's it. This book is complete. Super cute. And this little string will tie around the front of the book to close it and just wrap it around that little imposter of a circle. And that's it. She's done. You could add some little charms here to make it more whimsical and fun or give it a little bit of weight to the end of the strings. So I've got some pre-made ephemera. When I was creating my collages, I had some other map pieces that I turned into tags and pockets and little notebooks. So I've got the pieces that coordinate together just clipped with a paper clip so I could remember which tags go with which pocket. I'm just going to glue this pocket on the two sides and the bottom and put that right on the front of my notebook and press that in, and that's it. So this is the fun part of these types of books. You can journal in them, you can glue pictures, you can whatever, make notes, whatever you want to do. You could even paint in this because this handmade paper is designed to withstand paint. So I also have this little set of coffee dyed notebooks. I had some of those collage pieces left over and I cut up some pieces of coffee dyed paper and created these little cute flippy notebooks. I just stapled the collage pieces to the top and that's it. I'm just going to pop this into my journal and wrap it around. So like I said, you could do all kinds of stuff to decorate these. I'm going to save whatever I have left to make my second journal because I have two covers like this. My strings were quite stark white. I could have used a different thread, but when I started making this book, this thread was already on my needle, so that's why I used it. I thought, "Oh, we'll just go with what we have." So I've got some Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just inking up that thread. Now, because it's a wax thread, I'm not sure if it'll even stay, if it'll end up on my hands, who knows? But just for the purposes of this video, I just wanna make the aesthetic look match. So I'm just gonna cover up that white thread, and our journal is complete. So I mentioned about that bonus tip for some of those scraps. So let's take a look at that. Here are a couple of little things that I made with those leftover scraps. I created a couple of little notebooks. For this one, I have a piece of scrap paper and I used a couple of brads, and it's not straight, but you get the idea. I just poked a few holes and created this little notepad. And then for this one, I just folded the pieces in half and I stitched it together and tied a little bow on top. So they create these little cute miniature little notebooks. I also decided to make a little book plate for the front of my book using the same paper. So I'm just using a felt pen, which is a really bad idea on this cotton paper, but that's okay. We're just going to keep going. I wrote the word journal and then I just distressed the edges a little bit with my fingers because I didn't want it to have a super clean cut because then it kind of wouldn't match the rest of the edges on this. So I'm just roughing up the edges with my fingernail, and then I'm going to grab some Distress Ink Vintage Photo and just directly with my ink pad rub across the edges of this paper. And then I had a couple of little scraps and bits of lace left over, and I'm going to glue those right to the back of this paper. I'm using Eileen's Fabric Fusion, and I'll just adhere my little pieces of lace to the back of my little word here and tack that in, and I'll glue that right to the front of my journal. And then that's it. There we go. So I'm just going to pop these little extra pieces that I made into my journal. I ended up clipping my little notebook in with a little clip, and I can add this over top of a page here like this. It can be used as a bookmark even. And for this little notebook, I'm going to tuck it onto the side of a page. I'm going to tie up my little journal, and there we go. So just a couple of cute little ideas to use up some of those scraps. I hope that this video has inspired you to pull out some of your supplies and make a book for yourself. Okay, so that's going to be it, guys. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it here with me. I hope you enjoyed this quick beginner process to making a handmade book. If you're interested in anything you've seen here today, you'll find the products linked in the description box down below. Coming up on screen are some videos I think you may enjoy. Have yourself a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!